I was just about to knock on my parents' door when I overheard them tell my brother, "Don't stress about the debt. We'll make your sister cover it. She never refuses family." Silently, I walked away and moved all my savings. What they didn't realize was Ashley Miller had always known her role in the family. From the time she was a little girl growing up in the suburbs of Austin, Texas, her path seemed carved in stone. Be responsible, keep the peace, solve problems, and never, ever let anyone down. At 32 years old, nothing much had changed, except now the problem she was expected to solve came with dollar signs attached. On that particular Saturday afternoon, Ashley had no grand intentions. She was simply swinging by her parents' house to drop off a small anniversary gift, a framed photograph of the family from happier times, before money and mistakes had begun to tear holes in the fabric of their relationships. The Texas sun hung hot and lazy over the horizon as she pulled her gray sedan into the driveway she had memorized long ago. Everything about the scene was familiar. The cracked walkway her father always promised to fix, the ceramic wind chimes her mother refused to take down even though they had faded a pale ghost of their former selves, and the stoop where her brother, Ryan, used to sit tossing a basketball into the air while scheming ways to dodge responsibility. She had not planned to eavesdrop. The thought mortified her, even now. Ashley had been raised on the belief that privacy was sacred. But as she approached the door, gift tucked under her arm and a smile rehearsed for her mother's approval, voices floated through the thin slats of the window beside the porch. "I'm telling you, Ryan, don't stress about the debt. Your sister will cover it. She never refuses family." Ashley froze, her hand halfway to knocking. The voice was unmistakably her mother's, tinged with that practiced blend of exasperation and manipulation that only years of motherhood could hone. Her father's low grunt of agreement followed. "We have been through this before." She helped with the car, the tuition, even when she said she couldn't. This is no different. Ryan's reply was less clear, a grumble of dissatisfaction, or maybe guilt, though Ashley doubted he felt much of the latter these days. He had always known how to sidestep blame, how to let others pick up after him. "Exactly," her mother continued, her tone hardening. "Ashley's built for this. She works, she saves. It is practically what she's for at this point. Family comes first, and she's never said no. Not once." Ashley's breath caught in her throat. Not once. The words rang crueler than any insult. All those years of stepping in, of telling herself it was love that drove her to pay off Ryan's parking tickets, to co-sign his first apartment lease, to send grocery gift cards when her parents hinted at hard months. She had thought she was being kind. They had thought she was being foolish. Slowly, deliberately, Ashley backed away from the door. The photograph in her hands felt suddenly ridiculous, a prop from a play she no longer wished to perform in. Without a sound, she returned to her car, started the engine, and drove home with her heart pounding a traitor's rhythm against her ribs. At home, in the sterile quiet of her apartment, she sat down at her computer and stared at her savings account. Years of careful budgeting stared back at her. The emergency fund she had built from scratch, the retirement account steadily growing, the modest investment portfolio she had hoped might one day buy her freedom from the job she no longer loved. In that moment, the money felt less like security and more like bait dangling in front of people who believed they were entitled to it. For the first time in her life, Ashley hesitated over the transfer button. She had never needed to hide her finances before, never imagined she would want to, but now the path seemed lit in neon. Move the money, lock it away, protect herself. She called her financial advisor and arranged to transfer every liquid asset into a trust account, newly created and accessible only through a lawyer she trusted implicitly. The paperwork would be tedious. The fees would not be cheap. But the relief, when the final confirmation email arrived, tasted like freedom. What they did not realize, what they had never bothered to ask, was that Ashley had been quietly preparing for this moment for years. Not because she mistrusted them, though perhaps she should have, but because she knew that people who assumed you would always say yes would eventually take everything you had if you let them. And so she had built safeguards, silent ones, quiet accounts and contingency plans and legal protections tucked away like insurance policies against her own family. She did not cry. She did not rage. Instead, Ashley sat alone in her small kitchen, staring out at the indifferent sprawl of Austin through her window blinds, and felt something shift inside her. Not anger exactly. Not yet, but resolve as solid and cold as the granite beneath her coffee mug. They would not take this from her. Not this time. When the phone rang later that evening, it was her mother. Ashley let it go to voicemail. She listened to the message once, then deleted it without saving. "Hi, honey. Just wondering if you're still coming by. We were hoping you might help us out with something. Nothing urgent. Call me when you can." Ashley closed her laptop. For the first time in years, she felt no compulsion to respond. She had already made her decision. The following Monday unfolded with the artificial normalcy Ashley had come to expect from corporate life. Emails stacked themselves in her inbox like polite little threats. Colleagues nodded at her with detached efficiency, and her boss asked if she could take on a few extra projects because you're so dependable. Dependable. That word, once a badge of honor, now clung to her skin like something diseased. Ashley pushed through her day, mechanically completing tasks while her thoughts churned beneath the surface. She did not tell anyone what had happened over the weekend. Not her friends, not her coworkers, not even Monica, her closest confidant at work, who had always suspected that Ashley's family leaned too heavily on her, but had never pressed for details. What haunted her was not simply the knowledge of what her parents and Ryan had said, but the tone they had used. Casual, assumed, as if her financial sacrifice was a natural law, like gravity or the turning of the earth, that, more than anything, had unraveled something inside her. By Tuesday evening, Ashley's resolve solidified into action. Curiosity clawed at her now, sharper than fear. She needed to understand the scope of the situation, to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole went before she could begin sealing the exits. She began with what she knew: Ryan's debts. Gambling, she suspected. Maybe credit cards, payday loans. Risky, impulsive choices had always been his pattern. But how bad was it, really? A few $1,000s? Tens of thousands? After a restless night, Ashley took a personal day from work and drove to her bank. Not the small branch near her apartment, but the main downtown office where her family's accounts had been managed for decades. It felt symbolic, going to the heart of things. In the sterile comfort of the bank's conference room, she sat across from a senior advisor she had met only once before, a man named Henry, who wore cufflinks shaped like tiny airplanes and had the unhurried manner of someone who spent his days moving numbers around far larger than Ashley's modest net worth. "I need to confirm the status of any accounts where my name is listed," she said after the pleasantries had been dispensed with. "Joint accounts, co-signatures, anything with my authorization attached." Henry nodded, tapping keys with precise fingers. "Of course, Ms. Miller. Let me pull that up." What he found should not have surprised her, but it did. An old joint account, one she had opened with her parents years ago to help them manage a medical emergency, still existed. The balance was negligible, less than $200, but recent activity showed attempted withdrawals. Her parents had been trying to access it, despite her having moved her finances elsewhere long ago. That account should have been closed, Ashley said. Technically, it remains open unless all parties sign to terminate it, Henry explained. "Would you like to proceed with closing it now?" "Yes." Immediately, he printed forms for her to sign, but paused before sliding them across the polished oak table. "There's something else," he said, his brow furrowing. "It looks like there's been a flag placed on this account, a pending legal hold." Ashley's stomach tightened. "A hold? From whom?" Henry's fingers danced over the keyboard again. "It appears, yes, it's connected to a lien filed by a financial institution. A debt linked to Mr. Ryan Miller. Your brother, correct?" She nodded slowly, her heart sinking. "It references a debt exceeding $100,000, secured in part by this account and another under your name. They appear to have linked your financial history as collateral, possibly through guarantor documents." He glanced up, his expression now edged with caution. "Were you aware of this?" "No," Ashley said, her voice flat. "I never agreed to guarantee any debt of his." Henry's eyes softened with something like sympathy. "You may want to speak with a legal advisor. This is not uncommon in cases involving family businesses or shared assets, but it is highly irregular without explicit consent. Ashley left the bank with a folder of printouts and a pounding headache. She drove home in silence, her thoughts spinning faster than the wheels beneath her. By the time she reached her apartment, she had already scheduled a meeting with an attorney. The lawyer's office was a world apart from the bank. Smaller, messier, cluttered with files and the scent of burnt coffee. Matthew Conway had been recommended by a colleague, a man known for handling messy, uncomfortable cases with discretion. He listened without interruption as Ashley laid out what she knew, then examined the documents with a frown deep enough to swallow his mouth. "This isn't just carelessness," he said at last. "It looks like your brother's creditors have been deliberately maneuvering to entangle your assets. See this? Your name appears on this loan document as a guarantor. That's why they're linking your accounts." "I never signed that," Ashley said, her throat tight. "Maybe you did," Matthew said. "Or maybe someone used paperwork you signed years ago and altered it. It happens more often than you'd think, especially when family's involved. Was there ever a time you signed anything for Ryan? Co-signed, opened an account, gave authorization on anything?" Ashley's mind reeled backward, searching. College, a student account. Her father asking her to sign a form just to make things easier for Ryan to get his first checking account. She had barely glanced at it. "That could be it," she said slowly. Matthew nodded grimly. "If that's the foundation, they might have built on it. You'd be shocked how creative people can get when they're desperate. What do I do? First, we secure your current assets, which you've already done. Good thinking, by the way. Next, we investigate how your name ended up on these debts. If there's forgery or fraud, we find it. If it's a misunderstanding, we clarify it through legal channels. Either way, this won't be quick." Ashley left his office feeling both reassured and terrified. She had thought moving her money would be enough. Now it seemed she was only at the beginning of a much darker labyrinth. That evening, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat down at her kitchen table with a notebook. She began to map it out, the bank accounts, the loans, the documents, the conversations. She listed everything she could remember about her family's financial history, every favor, every signature. Patterns began to emerge. Her father's insistence on handling paperwork himself. Her mother's tendency to dismiss her questions with "just trust us, honey." Ryan's recklessness always cushioned by someone else's sacrifice. She realized with a clarity that stunned her that this had been building for years. Not a sudden betrayal, but slow erosion of boundaries. She had been complicit in her silence and her compliance. They had counted on that. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. A message from her mother, breezy and casual. "Stopped by your place today, but you weren't home. Let's catch up soon. Love you." Ashley stared at the screen until the words blurred. The audacity of it. As if nothing had changed. As if they had not been planning to feed her to the wolves just days ago. She deleted the message and blocked the number. Tomorrow, she would start digging deeper. There had to be more. There always was. Ashley barely slept. Morning arrived with the same dull grayness that seemed to have settled over her entire life since the weekend. She dressed mechanically, her mind far from her closet or the weather outside. Ryan's debts were worse than she had imagined, and now she could feel their claws digging at the edges of her future. The one thing she still did not understand was just how deep the damage went, and who, exactly, had been pulling the strings behind her back. By 9 o'clock in the morning, she was seated at her computer again, combing through her financial records with meticulous attention. Bank statements, investment reports, old emails. She searched them all. It was in her email archives that she stumbled across the first concrete clue, one that made her pulse thud harder against her ribs. An old message from her father, dated 5 years earlier, forwarding her some paperwork to review quickly and send back signed. Nothing urgent, just housekeeping for the family. Attached was a scanned PDF with signatures already filled in, hers among them. Ashley opened the document with trembling fingers. The title was innocuous: Authorization to Access Joint Financial Accounts. The wording, however, granted broad permissions. Too broad. She had never read it. She had trusted them, and now she was paying the price. She sent the file to Matthew, her lawyer, with a brief message. This might be where it started. His reply came less than 20 minutes later. This is exactly the kind of thing we need. I'll dig into this. Meanwhile, do you have any insight into the debts themselves? Who the lenders are? Ashley did not. Not yet, but she intended to find out. Her next step took her to a place she never thought she would willingly go, Ryan's apartment. A cramped unit in a fading complex on the edge of town. The sort of place where blinds hung crooked in the windows and old cars leaked oil in the parking lot. She had not been there in months. Not since bailing him out of his last mess. Some issue with unpaid utilities and a girlfriend who had walked out with most of the furniture. Ryan answered the door shirtless, bleary-eyed, his hair sticking up at odd angles. He blinked at her like someone trying to place a face they had not expected to see. Ashley, what the hell are you doing here? I need to talk to you. He scratched his stomach and stepped aside. You could have called. She entered without answering, scanning the apartment automatically. Pizza boxes, empty beer cans, a television larger than the furniture warranted, a coffee table littered with unopened mail, bills, most of them, collection notices. A letterhead caught her eye, and she crossed the room to pick it up without asking permission. Ryan scowled. Seriously? You're just going to go through my stuff now? This is serious, Ryan. She held up the envelope. Do you even know how much you owe? He flopped onto the stained couch with a groan. Too much. Does it matter? You know how this ends. You'll fix it. Not this time. He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. What's going on with you? Ashley sat opposite him, the letter still in her hand. I know about the loan. The one with my name attached. Yeah, well, that's not my fault. Dad said it was fine. Said you wouldn't even notice. Her breath left her in a slow, controlled exhale. Do you hear yourself? You use me. They use me. Ryan shrugged. You're better at this stuff. Money, responsibility. You always figure out. I'm done figuring it out for everyone else. I'm cleaning up this mess, but not for you, for me. He laughed, short and humorless. Good luck with that. You're tied to it whether you like it or not. Not for long. She stood, ignoring his muttered insults as she gathered a stack of envelopes from the table. Names of lenders, collection agencies, legal notices, pieces of the puzzle she intended to assemble. Outside, the Texas heat pressed down on her as she sat in her car, flipping through the documents. One name appeared more than once, a private lender specializing in high-risk loans. Interest rates bordering on predatory, repayment schedules designed to fail. They had locked Ryan in a cage he would never escape on his own. And thanks to those old signatures, they had a key to her cage as well. Back at her apartment, Ashley laid everything out across her kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. The pattern was clear. Ryan's debt had spiraled through reckless borrowing, aided and abetted by their parents' silent encouragement. They had expected Ashley to catch him, as she always had. But this time they had gone too far. Matthew's response to the documents was swift and unsparing. This is worse than I thought. These lenders aren't playing games. They're looking for assets, and your history made you a prime target. What can I do? Keep moving your assets out of reach, and prepare for a fight. We'll start by contesting the guarantor claim, arguing lack of consent and misrepresentation. But we need more. Proof that you were misled. Ashley thought of her father's office. His files, his meticulously kept records. He had been a small-time accountant for decades, operating out a converted garage behind their house. If anyone had the paper trail, it was him. She had avoided that place for years, but now she saw it in a new light. Not as a nerve center of her family's stability, but as a vault where her chains had been forged. She drove there after dusk, parking on a side street to avoid the driveway where her mother's car sat gleaming. The office door was locked, but she still remembered where her father kept a spare key, a magnetic box beneath the third stone of the front steps. She let herself in, heart thudding louder than the creak of the hinges. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ink and something older, The stale breath of decades spent balancing books for other people while quietly unbalancing his own daughter's future. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A battered desk hunched beneath shelves of ledgers and binders. Ashley moved quickly, methodically, opening drawers, scanning labels, client files, tax returns, payroll records. Then, near the back, a drawer labeled simply, Family. Inside, folders. Her name, Ryan's. Documents she recognized and others she did not. Copies of the authorization forms. Letters from lenders. Applications with signatures she barely remembered giving or never had. Notes in her father's handwriting. Ensure Ashley's inclusion. Leverage stable income. Backup collateral if necessary. Her hands shook as she photographed everything, knowing this would be the evidence Matthew needed. Proof not just of fraud, but of intent. They had built this on her back, brick by silent brick. She locked the door behind her when she left. The key returned to its hiding place as if nothing had disturbed the sanctity of their little empire. But inside, something fundamental had cracked. Driving home, Ashley did not cry. She did not rage. She planned. The next morning, she delivered the files to Matthew in person. "This changes everything," he said, flipping to the pages. "With this, we can tear their whole scheme apart. But you need to be ready for the fallout." "I am." He met her gaze, measuring her resolve. "No contact with them until we're ready to file. No explanations, no warnings. They'll try to manipulate you, twist it back on you." "I know." When she returned to her apartment, her voicemail held another message from her mother. "Hi, honey. I hope you're okay. You seemed a little distant lately. Call us, will you? Ryan's been worried. We're all just trying to figure things out together." Together? Ashley deleted the message without listening to the end. Ashley sat in Matthew's office again, but this time the conversation did not start with strategy. It started with bad news. His expression told her as much before he said a word. "They try to access your accounts again," Matthew said, his voice clipped with irritation he rarely showed. "The old joint one, obviously, but also your personal account. They filed a formal request to the bank claiming shared rights of access, using the original paperwork your father submitted." Ashley blinked. "But I moved everything. I closed those accounts." "You did," Matthew confirmed, pushing a folder toward her. "But they're trying to leverage the legal process to freeze funds retroactively. Their claim hinges on that authorization document. They're saying you were aware of all these transactions, that you've been part of this arrangement for years. That's insane." "It is, but it's not uncommon. And worse. They filed a petition with the court to secure an emergency injunction on any assets in your name while this is sorted out. Which means, depending on how the judge rules, you could wake up one morning and find everything frozen." Ashley exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of her chair to keep from shaking. "Can they win that?" "Not if we fight hard and fast. But it complicates things. You're not just cleaning up Ryan's mess anymore. Ashley, you're defending yourself from your own family's attempt to take what's yours through legal force. They're really doing this." Matthew's gaze softened, just a fraction. People do strange things when they're drowning in debt, especially when they convince themselves it's not really theft if it stays in the family. The phrase twisted in her stomach like a knife. She took the file home and read every line of the court petition. The language was sterile but brutal. References to mutual financial understanding, shared familial responsibility, Ashley Miller's historical consent to support debts undertaken by Ryan Miller. Lies, dressed up in legal jargon. They had framed her history of generosity as a legal obligation. That night, Ashley sat in the quiet of her apartment, staring at the ceiling while the city moved on outside her window. Somewhere across town, her parents were likely discussing her as they might discuss a faulty appliance. How best to fix her. How to make her useful again. Ryan was probably nursing another hangover, secure in the knowledge that she would never truly abandon him. The thought sparked something fierce and cold beneath her ribs. They had underestimated her. The next morning, Ashley met Matthew at the bank, where they faced a new obstacle. The bank's legal team had received notice of the injunction petition and, as a precaution, had placed temporary restrictions on her accounts, not the trust account. Matthew had seen to that, but her checking, her savings, even her brokerage account had been flagged for review. "I'm sorry, Ms. Miller," the branch manager said, her tone polite but final. "Until this is resolved, we're required to comply with the court's preliminary notice." Ashley nodded stiffly. "How long does that take?" "Days, maybe weeks, depending on how aggressively your family pursues this." Outside, Matthew leaned against his car, flipping through messages on his phone. "We're filing a countersuit today," he said. "Emergency motion to block their injunction and to demand release of your accounts. But get ready. This will get uglier before it gets better. What do I do in the meantime?" Ashley asked. He glanced at her, then handed over an envelope. "Cash. I withdrew it from the trust before they filed. Keep it quiet. Enough to float you until this shakes out." Ashley took it, feeling the weight of her situation pressed between the thin layers of paper. "Thank you. You're going to get through this," Matthew said. "But brace yourself. They're not done trying." He was right. That evening, as she walked up the steps to her apartment, she found her father waiting by her door, dressed as if for church, calm as though this was a casual visit. He straightened when he saw her and offered a faint smile. "Ashley, we need to talk." "I don't think we do," she said, unlocking her door. He followed her in any way, uninvited. "You've made this more complicated than it needed to be." She set her bag down carefully, keeping herself between him and her bedroom where the cash envelope now lay hidden. "I didn't make this complicated. You did." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You've always been so good at playing victim. Even now, we're trying to protect Ryan, protect the family. You're making it harder. I'm protecting myself. Something none of you ever thought I'd do. You're overreacting." His tone sharpened. "We assumed you would help like you always have. That's not betrayal, Ashley. That's family. We take care of our own." "No, you exploit your own. There's a difference." He looked at her then with something close to disappointment, as if she had failed some unspoken test. "Your mother's worried about you." Ashley almost laughed. "Tell her not to lose any sleep." "You think this will end well? Dragging your own parents through court? You think that makes you strong?" "No," Ashley said, stepping toward the door and opening it pointedly. "It makes me free." He stood for a moment, as if weighing his options, then walked out without another word. Ashley locked the door behind him and leaned against it, trembling, not with fear, but with rage. For the first time, she saw them clearly, not as a flawed but loving family she had clung to, but as people willing to dismantle her life for their convenience. Matthew's prediction proved accurate the next day. A courier delivered notice of an official lawsuit, Ryan, with her parents' backing, seeking damages for emotional distress and financial sabotage stemming from her refusal to uphold familial financial commitments. They accused her of breaching verbal contracts, of acting in bad faith, of hoarding resources that rightly belonged to the family unit. Ashley handed the papers to Matthew without reading past the opening lines. "This is them trying to scare you," he said. "It's flimsy. We'll crush it." But she felt the weight of it anyway, like a stone in her chest. Not because she feared losing, but because this confirmed what she had begun to suspect. They would stop at nothing. No tactic was beneath them. No lie too bold. The following week blurred into a cycle of legal meetings, document reviews, and nights spent staring at her ceiling. Ashley withdrew into herself, speaking only when necessary, trusting only Matthew. The world outside shrank to the dimensions of her apartment, her lawyer's office, and the courthouse. It was during one of those quiet evenings that her phone rang. Not her mother this time, or Ryan, but Monica from work. "I know you said you didn't want to talk about it," Monica began, her voice gentle. "But I heard something today. Your parents, are they really suing you?" Ashley closed her eyes. "Yes." Monica swore softly. "Ashley, I don't even know what to say." "There's nothing to say. I'll deal with it. You shouldn't have to deal with it alone." "I'm not alone. I have a good lawyer." "That's not what I meant." Monica's paws stretched. When this is over, whatever over looks like, you have people who care, who see you. Just don't forget that. Ashley thanked her and hung up, her throat too tight for more words. The loneliness was real, but so was the clarity it brought. She had spent her life believing family meant obligation. Now she was learning it could also mean betrayal. The people who cared were not always the ones who shared your blood. The next day, Matthew called with news. They've doubled down, filed another motion, claiming you moved assets to defraud creditors. They're painting you as malicious, Ashley, vindictive. Can they make that stick? Not if we stay ahead of it. But it's time to prepare for court. We're moving past negotiations. Ashley nodded, her jaw set. Then let's fight. The courthouse loomed in front of Ashley, gray and impersonal beneath a sky thick with the promise of rain. Matthew had warned her that these hearings would stretch over weeks, maybe months, but nothing had prepared her for the exhaustion that began creeping in after only a few days of legal maneuvering. Every motion filed, every counterargument delivered, seemed like just another brick added to the wall between her and the life she had been trying to build. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings unfolded in cold, formal language. Her family's attorney, a man with a politician's smile and a predator's patience, painted Ashley as cold-hearted, financially ruthless, and emotionally detached from the family who had, in his words, carried her through so much. Matthew countered with facts, with documentation, with the quiet ferocity of someone who knew this game well. Still, the process drained her. Every affidavit submitted, every cross-examination endured, scraped a little more flesh from already raw nerves. On the fourth day of testimony, something unexpected surfaced. Matthew leaned toward her just before the judge entered. We're submitting a discovery request for all financial records tied to your parents' home. I suspect something is hidden there. Ashley frowned. What do you mean? They leverage your name to secure debts tied to Ryan. But your parents' home is involved too, and not just as collateral. There are inconsistencies in the paperwork. If I'm right, there's another layer here we haven't uncovered yet. The hearing proceeded with tedious arguments over asset tracing and fiduciary duty. Ashley sat silent through most of it, watching her parents across the aisle. Her mother refused to meet her gaze. Her father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Ryan lounged with the careless arrogance of someone who believed consequences were for other people. When court adjourned for the day, Matthew pulled her aside in the hall. Be ready. We're about to get answers. Their lawyer's going to fight the disclosure, but we'll win it. And when we do, I think you're going to understand just how deep this betrayal runs. Ashley went home that night, unable to shake the unease curling in her stomach. She had thought the worst of it lay in the debts, the forged signatures, the legal attacks. But Matthew's words planted something colder, sharper. What had her parents been hiding all these years beneath the veneer of suburban normalcy? Days later, the records arrived. Matthew called her in with a tone that left no doubt. Something significant had been found. They used your name as a guarantor not just for Ryan's debts, he explained as he spread the papers across his desk, but to secure a second mortgage on their house, a substantial one, over $100,000. They claimed it was for renovations, but there's no trace of any such work being done. Ashley stared at the documents. Her name was there, in ink that looked just like her signature, but belonged to hands she no longer trusted. When did this happen? About 3 years ago. Quietly, filed through a secondary lender notorious for loose verification standards. Your father signed on your behalf. She felt the ground shift beneath her. 3 years ago, that's when they asked me to look over some paperwork. I told them I was too busy. I never signed anything. You did, or rather, he did for you. The timing matches. They leveraged that mortgage to cover Ryan's gambling debts when things started spiraling. When that wasn't enough, they started stacking other debts on top, hoping you wouldn't notice. Ashley's hands curled into fists. So they've been planning this longer than I thought. It gets worse. That mortgage ties into a shell account your father opened. Funds were funneled there, disguised as business expenses. From there, straight to loan sharks, gambling fronts. They gambled your future to buy Ryan more time. What about the house? What happens now? Matthew's expression was grim. It's already under threat of foreclosure. They've been hiding the notices. That house is going to auction unless someone steps in, which is what they wanted from you from the beginning, to bail them out quietly without a fight. Ashley sat back, stunned into silence. All those years of dutiful visits, holiday dinners, birthday cards signed with love, they had been sinking beneath this rot the entire time. And through it all, they had smiled at her, accepted her help, and planned how best to strip her bare when the moment came. "What do we do now?" she asked finally, her voice flat. "We prove fraud. We fight the injunction. We expose this for what it is. But understand, Ashley, this is going to get uglier. They're cornered. People do desperate things when they're cornered." That prediction proved true sooner than either of them expected. The next morning, Ashley found her apartment door ajar. Nothing was missing, nothing broken. But the envelope of cash Matthew had given her was gone. Her laptop untouched. Her jewelry untouched. Just the cash. A warning more than a theft. She called the police, filed a report that she knew would go nowhere, and changed her locks. But the message was clear. They were watching her. They wanted her to know. When she told Matthew, he nodded grimly. They're getting reckless. That works in our favor. Document everything. Ashley began photographing every envelope that arrived, recording every phone call, logging every encounter. The records grew into a file thicker than she ever imagined she would hold on her own family. One afternoon, sorting through another stack of her father's financial records, she found something buried deep, a letter from a lawyer not affiliated with her case, a name she did not recognize. The letter outlined the establishment of a trust fund, one supposedly created for Ryan years earlier. The fund had been drained slowly over time, siphoned into accounts that led back, indirectly, to her father's shell companies. When she presented this to Matthew, his reaction was immediate. This is what we needed, proof of premeditated fraud, not just desperation. They've been orchestrating this for years. Ashley, they planned for Ryan to fail, planned for you to cover it. Every step of this has been deliberate. The trust fund had been substantial once, nearly $200,000 intended for Ryan's education and his future. Money her parents had protected for him, even as they borrowed against her name. Money they had squandered behind closed doors. Ashley felt something settle cold and final in her chest. They had never expected Ryan to stand on his own. They had never expected her to fight back. The next court date loomed with heavier stakes. Matthew prepared her for the worst. Character assassinations, accusations of abandonment, attempt to paint her as selfish, vindictive, cold. But what she feared most now was not the courtroom battles. It was what she might still uncover. Because if they had hidden this much from her already, what else had they been willing to sacrifice in the name of family? The days leading up to the next court hearing passed with slow, relentless weight. Ashley found herself moving through her routines like a stranger in her own life. Work became secondary. Friends stopped asking her to meet for dinner or drinks after too many declined invitations. The air around her seemed thinner, her focus narrower. The world had reduced itself to legal documents, court dates, and the quiet dread that had settled into her bones. What she did not expect was a knock at her door just afternoon on a Tuesday. She checked the peephole first. A man in a gray suit stood on the other side, holding a leather briefcase and a business card already in hand. He looked too polished to be another debt collector, too formal for someone sent to intimidate her casually. When she opened the door, he offered a small, practiced smile. "Ms. Miller, my name is Charles Vick. I represent one of your brother's creditors. May I come in?" Ashley considered telling him to leave. Instead, curiosity edged out caution. She stepped aside without a word and gestured toward the living room. He took a seat, opening his briefcase with smooth, deliberate motions. "I will be brief," he said. "I work for a firm specializing in the recovery of significant debts, particularly those tied to high-risk individuals like your brother. Normally, we would not approach family members directly, but your situation is unique." Ashley said nothing. He took her silence as invitation to continue. "You are, whether by accident or design, entangled in a rather substantial financial web. Over $100,000 in outstanding obligations multiple loans in default, and liens secured by documentation linking your name. My clients have little interest in the specifics of your family drama. They are interested in resolution. Then they can deal with my lawyer, Ashley said flatly. Mr. Vick smiled again, thinner this time. Of course, but I thought it might be worthwhile to speak plainly. Legal battles take time, money, energy. My clients prefer efficiency. They have authorized me to present you with an alternative arrangement. He slid a folder across the coffee table toward her. Inside, typed in crisp legal language, was an offer. Settle the debt privately. Pay a reduced lump sum. Still a staggering figure, but less than the total owed, and the matter would disappear from court. No more suits, no more claims, no more threats. They believe you have the resources to make this go away, Mr. Vick said. Discreetly, cleanly, Ashley pushed the folder back toward him. Tell your clients I am not cleaning up Ryan's mess. Not anymore. His expression did not change. Then prepare yourself, Ms. Miller. Court is only one arena. Pressure comes in many forms. With that, he stood, gathered his things, and left as smoothly as he had arrived. Ashley locked the door behind him and sank onto her couch, her heart pounding. This was not a creditor's desperation visit. This was a message. Her refusal to play the dutiful daughter was forcing hands she had not even realized were hovering above her. She called Matthew immediately. He listened without interruption, then said, Vick's firm has a reputation. Not technically illegal, but very aggressive. They leverage fear, suggest consequences without outright threats. It is designed to make you question how much more you are willing to fight. I am not paying them a dime, Ashley said. Good, but be ready. If they escalate, we escalate. Ashley hung up feeling no safer, but at least more resolved. The escalation came sooner than expected. 2 days later, as she was leaving for court, she found her car vandalized. Tires slashed, windshield shattered. Paint keyed with a single word scrawled across the driver's side. Liar. The police took a report, but there were no cameras in her building's parking lot. No witnesses. No fingerprints. Just a quiet confirmation that someone wanted her rattled. At the courthouse, Matthew met her with a tightened expression. You okay? Fine, Ashley said, even though her hand still trembled. Just a car. They will not scare me off. The hearing dragged. Her parents' attorney leaned harder into the narrative of family betrayal. Her father testified with cold precision, framing her as vindictive, unstable, even paranoid. Her mother wept quietly on the stand, painting pictures of a daughter they had always supported, always loved, now turning cruelly against them in their time of need. Ashley listened without flinching, lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound plausible. Matthew dismantled them methodically, piece by piece, but she saw how the judge watched her now with a hint of weary skepticism. Families did not end up here without ugliness on all sides. When court recessed, Ashley sat alone on a bench outside the courtroom, trying to steady her breath. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Walk away, Ashley. You are not built for this. No signature. No reply option. Just another crack in the walls tightening around her. Matthew noticed her pale face when she re-entered the room. Something wrong. They're trying to scare me again. Let them. Every move they make tells us they're worried. That afternoon, the judge ruled in her favor on one point. The injunction on her assets would be lifted, pending final review. A small victory, but one that gave her a sliver of breathing room. Her accounts were her own again. For now, outside the courthouse, Ryan waited. She almost walked past him, but he stepped directly into her path, forcing her to stop. You think you're winning, he said. You're not. Ashley met his gaze without flinching. I am not playing anymore, Ryan. That is the difference. He smirked, but there was a bitterness beneath it she had not seen before. They are my parents, too, you know. They're not going to let you ruin everything just because you finally decided to grow a spine. They ruined this themselves. I am just cleaning up the mess. You think they will ever forgive you for this? I stopped caring about that the moment they tried to steal my future. Ryan shook his head like she was something pathetic. You will regret this." She left him standing there, his threats falling flat against the armor she had built from months of betrayal. But as the days crawled forward, the pressure did not let up. More anonymous texts. A stranger following her home from the grocery store. Her mailbox stuffed with credit applications she had never requested. Attempts to reopen lines of credit in her name. Matthew documented everything, filed injunctions where he could, but the harassment was relentless. "This is not just about money anymore," he told her one evening over coffee in his office. "They want to break you, make you scared enough to walk away." "They picked the wrong person," Ashley said, though some nights she woke gasping from dreams of doors left unlocked and shadows moving through her apartment. One evening, sifting through yet another pile of mail, she found a letter postmarked from out of state. No return address. Inside, a photocopy of a document she recognized immediately. Her signature on the guarantor form for Ryan's loan. But scrawled across the bottom in unfamiliar handwriting were the words, "You never signed this. Ask the right questions." She brought it to Matthew the next day. He examined it closely, his expression sharpening. "This handwriting. It's not your father's, not your mother's." "Then who?" Matthew's mouth thinned. "That is what we're going to find out. But whoever sent this, they want you to know there is more to this than you think." Ashley left his office with the letter tucked back into its envelope, a chill settling into her spine. Secrets layered beneath secrets. Someone out there knew the truth and wanted her to keep digging. Ashley sat alone at her kitchen table long after the sun had gone down. The mysterious letter spread out in front of her beside a half-empty cup of coffee. The handwriting haunted her. It was not her father's, not her mother's, and certainly not Ryan's. But whoever had scribbled those words, "You never signed this," asked the right questions, seemed to know something she did not, and they wanted her to find it. Her instinct told her that whoever sent the letter was not trying to scare her. They had gone out of their way to mail it anonymously, from out of state no less. This was a breadcrumb, not a threat, and she intended to follow it. The next morning, Ashley met Matthew at his office with the letter in hand. He had already begun investigating the handwriting, sending copies to a forensic analyst to compare against signatures on all the relevant documents in her case. The process would take time, but neither of them wanted to wait passively for answers. "I think it's someone who used to work with my father," Ashley said. "Someone who handled his paperwork. An assistant, maybe. He's been in the same office for years, and people come and go. Someone had access to those documents before they were filed." Matthew nodded slowly, considering. It is possible an ex-employee with a guilty conscience, or someone looking to leverage information. We can subpoena his employment records. See who was there at the time those documents were prepared. "Do it. I need to know who sent this." As Matthew initiated the legal steps, Ashley took her own action. She drove to her father's office, the small, squat building behind the house where so much of this had been orchestrated. The sign still read Miller Financial Services, though she doubted much business was being conducted anymore. The blinds were drawn, the door locked. A closed sign hung crookedly in the window. She walked the perimeter, noting the security camera above the back door. It had been there for years, though whether it still worked was anyone's guess. If there were records of who had been coming and going, they might be in that system. She took photos of the camera's make and model, intending to ask Matthew how to subpoena footage if it existed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A known number again. Another message. "Stop digging. Walk away while you still can." Ashley snapped a picture of the screen and forwarded it to Matthew with a brief caption. "They are getting bolder." She left without trying the door again. Breaking and entering was not a road she wanted to walk, tempting though it was. Instead, she drove to the county records office and requested copies of any and all liens, mortgages, and financial filings tied to her family's name in the past decade. The clerk raised an eyebrow but complied. Hours later, Ashley sat surrounded by files in her apartment, piecing together a timeline more damning than she could have imagined. The second mortgage on her parent home had not been the first shady maneuver. Years earlier, there had been other loans, small at first, gradually escalating. Some had been paid off. Others quietly consolidated. Her name appeared on more than one, slipped in through addendums and amendments she had never seen. One pattern stood out. Every time Ryan found himself deeper in debt, her father found a way to adjust their financial structure, always with Ashley's name floating somewhere in the margins. They had been using her stability as collateral long before this latest disaster. She just had not seen it. Her phone rang, this time Matthew. "I have something. Your father's ex-secretary. Left 2 years ago. Her name is Diane Porter. Lives in Houston now. She handled most of the paperwork during the period we are focused on." Ashley's heart thudded. "Can we talk to her?" "I already reached out. She agreed to meet. Said she has been waiting for this call." Ashley drove to Houston the next day, a 3-hour trip made in tense silence. Diane Porter lived in a modest townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. She opened the door with a wary smile, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a careful manner. "You're Ashley," she said, not asking. "Come in." Inside, Diane poured tea and sat across from her at a small kitchen table piled with unopened mail and faded placemats. "I wondered how long it would take," Diane said. "I almost sent that letter myself years ago. But your father, well, he made things clear back then." "Clear how?" "Threats. Lawsuits. Promises to ruin me professionally if I talked. I was scared. I needed my job. But now, I am done being scared." Diane pulled a file from a drawer and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of emails, memos, draft documents. Notes in her handwriting detailing conversations with Ashley's father. One email in particular made Ashley's stomach turn. Instructions to forge Ashley's signature on guarantor documents, phrased as routine authorization. She trusts us implicitly. Attached was a scanned signature pulled from an old rental agreement. They had been copying her signature for years. "I kept everything," Diane said, "just in case. I figured someday he might turn on me too." Ashley's hand shook as she turned the pages. "Why send the letter now?" "I heard about the lawsuit. Small towns talk. I couldn't sit on this anymore. You deserve to know." Ashley nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. "Would you testify?" Diane's smile was sad but certain. "Absolutely." Back in Austin, Matthew nearly grinned when she handed over the file. "This is it," he said. "The smoking gun. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. With this, we can dismantle their entire case." Ashley felt relief, but only a sliver. "Will it be enough to protect me?" "It will be enough to turn the tide. They will not walk away clean from this." The next hearing was different. Matthew filed the new evidence immediately. Diane's affidavit landed like a grenade in the courtroom. Ashley's parents' attorney looked shaken for the first time since this had begun. Her father's expression turned to stone. Her mother burst into tears, loud and theatrical. The judge reviewed the documents with growing displeasure. "Forgery is a serious allegation," he said. "And this evidence, it paints a very troubling picture." Matthew pressed forward. "We move to dismiss all claims against my client on the grounds of fraud, misrepresentation, and coercion. Further, we will be filing separate charges." Court adjourned without a decision, but the direction was clear. The tide had turned. Outside, Ashley found herself face to face with her father once more. His mask had slipped entirely now, leaving only bitterness. "You think you won something here?" he said. "You think any of this makes you better than us?" "No," Ashley said, her voice steady. "It just makes me free." He sneered. "Family doesn't mean anything to you anymore." "It never did to you," she said and walked away. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Good. Keep going." She smiled for the first time in weeks. The morning light filtered weakly through Ashley's blinds, but it did little to chase away the heaviness she felt sitting at her kitchen table. The exhilaration from the previous court hearing, fueled by Diane Porter's revelations, had barely settled when the next blow arrived. A phone call from Matthew, voice grim and tight. "Ashley, we have a problem," he said without preamble. Her stomach clenched. "What kind of problem?" "The judge has rejected the motion to dismiss the claims against you," Matthew explained. "The court wants to see more concrete proof before it throws the case out. Your parents' lawyer filed a strong counterargument, emphasizing that allegations of forgery require a criminal investigation, not just a civil suit. Ashley leaned back, breath shallow. So this drags on? Yes, and there's more. Your parents have filed a motion to compel you to submit to a deposition. They want to question you under oath about your finances, your decisions, even your personal life. Ashley's mind raced. She had been prepared for a battle, but now it felt like the battlefield was closing in. They're trying to break you, Matthew said quietly. Deposition is an opportunity to intimidate, to trip you up. I won't give them that satisfaction, Ashley said, jaw set. I'll answer honestly, but I won't be baited. Matthew nodded. Good. Also, I need you to be careful. The harassment has escalated, hasn't it? Ashley thought of the anonymous texts, the vandalized car, the threatening messages. It's worse. I had a break-in attempt last night. Nothing was taken, but the lock was tampered with. Do not be alone, Matthew warned. Consider staying somewhere safer. I can recommend a place. Ashley made the arrangements that afternoon, moving to a friend's house on the outskirts of town. It was safer, quieter, but it came with a cost. Distant from her life, her sanctuary. The legal fight had become a siege, isolating her. The days blurred. Depositions felt like interrogations. Ashley was grilled not just on her financial decisions, but on her character, her motivations. Her parent attorney sought to paint her as greedy, ungrateful, and reckless. He asked about every dollar she had saved, every loan she had refused to co-sign, every word she had spoken about family loyalty. Ashley answered with truth and clarity. Every time she felt cornered, she remembered Diane's courage and Matthew's steady guidance. But the strain showed. Friends grew distant. Her employer questioned her availability. The media caught wind of the case, framing it as a scandal between privileged siblings, a story stripped of nuance. One afternoon, Ashley sat alone in her lawyer's office, exhausted and vulnerable. Matthew's voice broke through her fog. There's something else. The creditors are pushing for Ryan to be declared bankrupt. That means they'll pursue every possible asset, and your name is still on the hook for some of those. Ashley's eyes burned. I can't save him. You don't have to, but you have to prepare for the possibility that his bankruptcy will drag you in deeper. The pressure mounted. Ashley felt as though she were drowning in a tide that refused to recede. Then came the letter that shattered the last of her patience. It was an official notice from a collection agency she had never heard of, claiming a debt in her name for a sum far beyond any she recognized. The letter threatened lawsuits, wage garnishments, even criminal charges if the debt was not settled immediately. Ashley stared at the paper, disbelief and fury coiling inside her. How many more traps had been set? How far would they go? She called Matthew, voice shaking. This is a nightmare. He sighed. We need to dig deeper into this agency. This could be a scam or part of the harassment campaign. Either way, we'll fight it. Ashley knew she could not retreat. This was no longer just about money or family. It was about survival. The turning point came unexpectedly. Late one evening, Ashley received an email from an anonymous source claiming to have evidence of more financial manipulation, documents, recordings, anything that could bring the truth into the light. She arranged to meet in a public cafe the next day. When she arrived, a woman in her 40s approached her discreetly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, and emails that implicated her parents in additional fraudulent activities, moving money offshore, falsifying tax documents, hiding assets. The evidence was damning. Ashley thanked the woman, promising to keep her identity safe. Back at her friend's house, Ashley pored over the papers with Matthew. His eyes widened as he examined the new information. This could be the breakthrough we need, he said. We can use this to strengthen your defense and push for criminal investigations. But even with this new hope, the fight weighed heavily. Ashley felt the toll in sleepless nights, strained relationships, and moments of crushing doubt. One evening, she called her mother, voice steady but cold. Why, Mom? Why would you do this to me? The line went silent for a moment before her mother spoke, voice weary. It's not what you think. We did it for Ryan, for the family. For me? Ashley whispered. You used me. We did what we had to. No, you gambled with my life. The call ended, and Ashley felt the final severance. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Ashley would not back down. The cost was high, but her dignity was priceless. Ashley's life had become a mosaic of half-truths, legal documents, and late-night revelations. After the meeting with the anonymous informant, she found herself drawn deeper into the labyrinth of her family's financial secrets. Each discovery was like a fresh wound, but also a step closer to the truth she needed to claim her freedom. The new documents pointed to a pattern of deception far more extensive than she had imagined. Offshore accounts, falsified tax returns, and a network of shell companies intertwined with her father's modest accounting firm. The money flowed in circuits designed to conceal and confuse, but with the help of Matthew and forensic accountants, Ashley began to untangle the threads. One afternoon, Matthew called at his office with a file thicker than any before. "We found something," he said, sliding across the desk. "A ledger from one of the shell companies. It details a series of payments made directly to Ryan's gambling associates. Dates line up with the mounting debts we uncovered." Ashley traced the lines with her finger, feeling the cold reality of the transactions. This was more than a family bailout. This was a cover-up. Matthew nodded. "And the involvement of your parents in funneling these payments means they knew exactly what was happening." With this new evidence, Matthew drafted a motion to expand their case, including charges of conspiracy and financial fraud against her parents and brother. The courtroom battles intensified, with Ashley no longer on the defensive but pushing hard to reveal the full scope of the deception. The hearings became public, drawing media attention that Ashley had initially tried to avoid. Headlines painted her as the daughter fighting a corrupt family, a narrative that left her both exposed and vindicated. Public sympathy leaned toward her, providing a strange solace in a time of turmoil. One day, during a break in proceedings, Ashley received a call from a private investigator Matthew had hired to look into the shell companies and offshore accounts. "I have something you need to see," the investigator said. "Proof that the documents you've been given are just the tip of the iceberg. There's more money hidden in trusts registered under false names. We're tracing them now." Ashley's resolve hardened. The fight was no longer just about recovering her own assets, but exposing a calculated betrayal spanning years. Her relationship with her parents deteriorated completely. They refused to acknowledge the accusations, maintaining a facade of innocence. Attempts at family mediation were cold and ineffective, ending with bitter words and closed doors. One evening, Ashley confronted her father during a rare visit to the family home. "How could you do this? How could you put me at risk like that?" He looked at her without remorse. "You don't understand, family. We were protecting Ryan. Protecting him meant destroying me." He shook his head. "You're blinded by your pride, and you're blinded by your lies." She left the house, the finality of their fractured bonds settling over her like a shroud. Meanwhile, Matthew's legal team prepared for a critical hearing. The new evidence was compelling, and the prosecution was building a case for criminal charges. The threat of serious consequences shifted the balance. The court ruled to freeze all known assets tied to her parents and brother pending further investigation. This was a major victory, cutting off the flow of money and preventing further attempts to leverage Ashley's name. Ashley watched as the scales of justice began to tip. It was slow and painstaking, but the truth was finally breaking through the carefully constructed walls. The emotional toll remained immense. Ashley felt the sting of isolation and the weight of betrayal, but she also experienced moments of clarity and strength she had never known. One night, as she sat alone in her apartment, her phone rang. It was Diane Porter. "I heard about the recent ruling," Diane said softly. "You're doing what no one else could." Ashley smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm finally free." The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Ashley felt a glimmer of hope that she could rebuild her life on her own terms. The courtroom was unusually crowded that day, the gallery filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and faces Ashley recognized but hadn't expected to see. Neighbors, distant relatives, even a few of Ryan's acquaintances. The media frenzy had transformed the trial into more than a legal battle. It was a public spectacle of family betrayal and greed, unfolding in real time. Ashley sat beside Matthew, the familiar weight of nerves settling into her stomach. This hearing was a culmination of everything. The evidence, the betrayals, the countless sleepless nights. It was a moment when all the threads they had painstakingly gathered would be tested under the unforgiving scrutiny of the court. The judge entered, commanding silence with a sharp glance. Ashley straightened in her seat as the opening statements began. The prosecution laid out their case: fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and financial abuse. They painted a vivid picture of Ashley's parents and brothers systematically manipulating family trust and finances, using Ashley's name without consent, and plunging the family into ruin through reckless gambling and deceit. Ashley's parents' attorney responded with a defense centered on family loyalty obligations and a twisted interpretation of what it meant to protect one's own. He argued that Ashley had been aware, if not fully complicit, and that the debts were a collective responsibility. His tone sought sympathy, casting Ashley as selfish and ungrateful. The tension in the room was palpable as witnesses took the stand. Diane Porter's testimony was a highlight, her detailed account of forgery and coercion shaking the defense. Forensic experts explained the financial trail, showing the money funneled offshore and disguised through shell companies. Each revelation chipped away at the defense's narrative. Ashley watched as her parents' expressions shifted from confident to guarded. Ryan remained silent, occasionally exchanging furtive glances with his counsel. The weight of truth was pressing down, and the cracks in the facade were widening. Then came Ashley's moment to testify. She rose, heart pounding but voice steady. She recounted her journey: the discovery of the debts, the betrayal by those she loved, the fight to protect herself and reclaim her life. Her words carried the weight of lived experience, honesty, and a refusal to be silenced. Cross-examination was brutal. The defense tried to undermine her credibility, accusing her of greed, manipulation, and neglect. But Ashley held firm, refusing to be baited or broken. The judge, watching closely, seemed to respect her resilience. After hours of testimony, the hearing adjourned for deliberation. Outside the courthouse, Ashley was met by a small crowd of supporters, friends, colleagues, even strangers who had followed her story. Their presence was a balm to her weary spirit. Matthew pulled her aside. This was a strong showing. We gave them no room to maneuver. Now we wait. The waiting was agonizing. Days stretched into weeks as the court reviewed the evidence, testimonies, and legal arguments. Ashley tried to keep busy, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. Then, finally, the verdict. Ashley sat in the courtroom as the judge's voice echoed through the chamber. The court finds the defendants guilty of financial fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit debt evasion. The evidence presented is overwhelming and undeniable. Orders are issued to freeze all assets involved, and criminal proceedings will follow. Relief and exhaustion crashed over Ashley in equal measure. Years of fighting, betrayal, and heartbreak had culminated in this moment of justice. Her parents were silent, faces pale and drawn. Ryan stared at the floor, the gravity of the judgment settling in. Matthew leaned toward Ashley. This is just the beginning. There will be appeals and more battles, but today, you've taken control. Ashley nodded, feeling a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The fight was far from over, but she had passed the greatest test. As she left the courthouse, Ashley felt the sun warm on her face. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Ashley had barely settled back into her apartment after the court's ruling when a new development jolted her world again. It was early morning when the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet. She answered on the third ring. "Ms. Miller? This is Detective Laura Simmons with the Austin Police Department." Ashley sat up straighter. "Yes. We have new information regarding your family's financial case. I want to discuss it with you directly." Ashley felt her pulse quicken. "I'm listening." Detective Simmons explained that a new witness had come forward, someone with inside knowledge of her father's operations, willing to cooperate with law enforcement. This person had provided detailed recordings and documents showing deliberate falsification of financial records, alongside conversations where Ashley's father and mother discussed plans to shift blame and cover debts through her name. "Are these recordings authenticated?" Ashley asked. "We have preliminary verification. We believe this could significantly strengthen the ongoing criminal investigation. The detective arranged to meet Ashley later that day at the station. Ashley's mind raced. This was more than she had dared hope. Evidence, not only from the court but from the law enforcement side, could decisively expose her family's wrongdoing. At the police station, she met the witness, a former accountant named Stephen Hall, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a wary demeanor. Stephen recounted how he had worked under Ashley's father for nearly a decade, silently observing the gradual spiral into deceit. They started small, Stephen said, a forged signature here, a doctored ledger there. But over time, it became business as usual. I tried to intervene, but it's hard to stand up against family. He handed over a flash drive containing audio recordings of meetings where Ashley's parents discussed manipulating Ashley's name on documents, covering Ryan's losses with fabricated expenses, and pressuring employees to maintain silence. Ashley listened carefully, the weight of betrayal settling anew. Her parents had not only betrayed her trust, but had planned this deceit with calculated precision. The police promised to move quickly, assuring Ashley that her cooperation was invaluable. Returning home, Ashley felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was surfacing, sorrow that it had come at such a personal cost. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, Matthew prepared to introduce this new evidence during the next phase of the trial. He advised Ashley to brace herself for the emotional impact of testifying again, this time with the added weight of criminal charges looming over her family. The courtroom became the stage for a final reckoning. Prosecutors played the recordings piece by piece, allowing the judge and jury to hear the unmistakable voices of Ashley's parents plotting to use her as a financial scapegoat. Her parents sat motionless, faces pale as the evidence piled against them. Ryan looked defeated, the bravado finally stripped away. During cross-examination, Ashley's parents attempted to deny the authenticity of the recordings, calling them fabricated or taken out of context. But the mounting forensic evidence, combined with Stephen Hall's testimony, left little room for doubt. Ashley took the stand once more, speaking with a calm honesty that cut through the courtroom's tension. She spoke not only of the financial devastation, but of the emotional betrayal, how the people she loved most had used her in their schemes. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Ashley declined interviews, choosing instead to focus on the closure she felt beginning to form. The judge ruled in favor of law enforcement's motion to pursue criminal charges against Ashley's parents and Ryan. The family was to face trial for fraud, conspiracy, and other related crimes. Ashley's life would continue to be intertwined with this painful saga, but the course had changed irrevocably. No longer was she just a victim fighting to protect herself. She was now a witness and a survivor, bringing long overdue justice to those who had betrayed her. That evening, Ashley sat quietly, a sense of cautious hope settling in. The path ahead was daunting, but she was no longer walking alone or in the dark. The days following the judge's ruling in favor of criminal prosecution were a strange mixture of relief, exhaustion, and cautious optimism for Ashley. The courtroom battles that had consumed years were slowly evolving into a new phase, one where justice was not just a legal term, but a tangible possibility. Matthew worked tirelessly, coordinating with prosecutors, managing evidence, and preparing Ashley for a role as a witness in the upcoming criminal trial. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her, but with each passing day, she found herself growing stronger, more determined to see this through. Ashley had returned to her apartment, the space now quiet and orderly, a refuge from the chaos of public scrutiny. The scars of betrayal still lingered, but in the peaceful moments, she allowed herself to envision a future unshackled from the burdens her family had placed on her. One afternoon, Matthew stopped by with a folder of documents that contained the latest financial reports and asset freezes. The court has agreed to keep all known family assets frozen until the conclusion of the criminal proceedings, he said. That includes a family home and those offshore accounts. The money will be held in escrow. Ashley nodded, relief flooding her. It means they can't touch anything while the case is ongoing. That's right. It prevents further damage and protects your interests. She ran a hand over the folder, thinking about everything that had been lost, years of savings, trust, and familial bonds. But now, she could finally begin to rebuild. The legal process was slow and deliberate, each hearing a measured step toward closure. Ashley attended court dates, sometimes testifying again, other times simply observing as evidence was reviewed and scrutinized. The experience was emotionally draining but empowering. Outside the courtroom, life tried to reclaim its rhythm. Ashley returned to work part-time, slowly reconnecting with friends and rediscovering the activities she had abandoned during the legal storm. Yoga classes, book clubs, even quiet dinners at small cafes reminded her that life could hold joy beyond struggle. Yet, the shadows of her past remained. Rye had cut off contact, angry and bitter over the legal actions. Ashley's parents remained out of reach, their pride and denial cementing a permanent divide. One evening, Matthew called with news of a settlement offer from the defense, a last-ditch attempt to avoid criminal trial by agreeing to repay a portion of the debts and accepting some penalties. Ashley was torn. The offer meant the case could end sooner, sparing her the ordeal of a lengthy trial. But it also meant allowing her parents to avoid full accountability. After a sleepless night, she declined. "This is about more than money," she told Matthew. "It's about justice. They need to face the consequences." Matthew respected her conviction. Then we prepare for trial. In the months that followed, the case progressed steadily. Ashley's evidence, combined with witness testimonies like Diane Porter's and Stephen Hall's, built an unassailable case against her family. The court proceedings were rigorous, but the truth shone through the layers of deception. Gradually, the tension eased. Ashley found moments of peace in small victories, clearing her name officially, recovering control of her finances, and watching the courts acknowledge the wrongs done to her. She also began therapy, confronting the emotional wounds beneath the legal battles. The pain of betrayal, the loss of family, the struggle to trust again. These were challenges she faced with the same tenacity that had fueled her fight. One afternoon, Ashley received a letter from the court confirming the final financial and legal settlements. Her name was clear of all debts she had been wrongfully tied to. The family home was scheduled for auction, and the proceeds would be distributed to creditors. It was not the ending she had hoped for. A roof over her head would no longer be the same, but it was a beginning. Ashley looked out her apartment window at the Austin skyline, the sun setting in warm hues. She thought about the road ahead, rebuilding, healing, and creating a life grounded in her own choices. For the first time, she felt the possibility of true freedom. Ashley stood at the threshold of her new apartment, a modest but inviting space that she had carefully chosen months before, after the legal battles began to wind down. The lease was in her name alone, with no ties to her past or to the family that had betrayed her so deeply. The sunlight streamed through large windows, casting long golden rays across the hardwood floors. This place was hers, a sanctuary built on a foundation of her own hard work and resilience. The months since the court's final decisions had been a whirlwind of adjustment. Ashley had spent that time rebuilding not only her financial independence, but her sense of self. Therapy sessions had helped her unpack years of suppressed hurt and betrayal. She had reconnected with friends who had stood by her quietly through the storm and forged new bonds with people who respected her boundaries and celebrated her strength. On this particular afternoon, she was hosting a small gathering, just a few close friends and her lawyer, Matthew. They had become more than professional allies. Matthew had been a steady anchor through the turmoil, and she wanted to share this moment of calm and renewal with those who had supported her. As guests arrived, Ashley greeted them with genuine warmth. The laughter and conversations filled the apartment with life, a stark contrast to the silence that had once consumed her. The burdens of the past still lingered in the recesses of her mind, but here and now, there was only light. Later, as the group settled into the living room, Matthew raised a glass. "To Ashley," he said, voice steady, "for her courage, her perseverance, and for the future she is claiming on her own terms." The toast was met with smiles and nods. Ashley felt a well of gratitude swell within her. The journey had been long and painful, but the scars were now marks of survival, not defeat. After the guests left, Ashley sat alone, reflecting on how far she had come. The courtroom battles, the family betrayals, the threats and harassment, all had forged her into someone she barely recognized, yet deeply respected. She had learned that love could be complicated, even painful, and that family did not always mean unconditional support. A soft knock at the door startled her. It was Diane Porter, the former secretary whose courage had helped expose the truth. Diane held a small wrap box. "I wanted to bring you something," Diane said shyly. Ashley accepted the gift, unwrapping it to find a delicate bracelet. Simple, elegant, with a single charm shaped like a key. "A key," Diane explained, "to symbolize your strength in unlocking the truth and opening the door to a new life." Ashley's eyes shimmered with tears. "Thank you. It means more than you know." Diane smiled. "You're not alone anymore. You have people who see you and stand with you." The two women shared a quiet moment of understanding, bound by shared hardship and newfound hope. In the weeks that followed, Ashley made peace with the fact that Ryan had chosen a different path, one of anger and estrangement. Though it pained her, she accepted that some wounds might never fully heal. Her parents remained distant, their relationship fractured beyond repair. Yet, Ashley no longer carried the weight of obligation that had once crushed her. She pursued her career with renewed passion, investing in herself and her future. Financial stability returned on her terms, and with it, a profound sense of dignity. One evening, as she prepared dinner in her kitchen, Ashley glanced out the window at the Austin skyline, the city lights sparkling against the darkening sky. She felt a quiet satisfaction settle over her, a life rebuilt from the ashes, shaped by resilience and courage. She reached for the bracelet Diane had given her, sliding it onto her wrist. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of survival, of reclaiming agency in the face of betrayal. Ashley smiled to herself. For the first time, she knew that her victories were truly her own, untainted by the debts and manipulations of her past. Her future was unwritten, but it belonged solely to her. As the night deepened, Ashley closed the window, turning off the lights. She was ready for whatever came next, because she had finally learned that strength was not in carrying the burdens of others, but in standing firm for herself. The journey had been arduous, but Ashley had emerged whole, and she was free.